What's up, and welcome back to another episode of working on the Dirty 30. What's the Dirty 30? Well, this is the Dirty 30. It's my 1930 Dodge Coupe that we've turned into a pickup truck. In the last few episodes, we've built a new floor for this thing, built a whole new bed for it, and in the last episode, we built a bumper and put a fuel cell in it. And in today's video, we're going to continue to work on this thing, but we're not going to be working on the back. We're going to start working on the interior, more towards the front of the truck, so let's get into it. So what are we doing to the interior? Well, I'll show you. Since this is a man's truck, it's got a manual transmission, and that means you got to shift it yourself. And in order to do that, you need a clutch pedal, which we do not have. And also, if you want to stop the truck, you got to press the brakes, and we need a brake pedal for that, and I don't have one of those either. So today we're going to be building a clutch pedal and a brake pedal setup. Hopefully get some things operating in this thing, so let's get started. All right, when I bought the transmission for this build, the guy that I got it from also was nice enough to give me a set of pedals out of a mid-90s Dodge Ram, and I was really hoping to just be able to use these, but unfortunately, it's too wide and I just don't think it's gonna work. But we might still be able to use parts of this or some of it. I'm not sure what the plan is yet. I'm trying to figure that out, but this is the clutch and brake pedal setup out of a second-gen Dodge Ram. Okay, in order to create power brakes in a vehicle that doesn't create a lot of vacuum, you're going to need a power booster, and this is a hydro boost, which runs off the power steering system, and that's what we're going to be using. And then in order to connect the brakes to something, you need a master cylinder, so I got this Wilwood master cylinder. It's an 1.1/8" master cylinder, and we're going to bolt all this together and try and stick it in the truck. Okay, there are certain aspects of this thing that we absolutely cannot change, like the location of the firewall in relation to the engine and how much area we have right here in order to mount this kind of stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this master cylinder mounted on the firewall in a spot that I think is going to work, and then I'm going to build the pedals off of that, which is basically the easiest way for me to figure this out. So I'm going to try and get this master cylinder mounted about right here, but I got to make sure that I can still get this rod in here because I want to continue to use that. And I also need to make sure it's going to clear the engine, so it's going to go somewhere about right here. Cardboard template, drill a hole. Drill a bigger hole. Test fit. Like butter. All right, with that temporarily bolted into place, you can see what we're working with here. Not a lot of room, but you can see the master cylinder clears the engine. And I moved it over this way some to leave just enough room for the clutch master cylinder to go right about here. But we're gonna worry about that in a little bit. On the interior, you can see there's not a lot of room in the firewall area underneath the dash here, but this is what we're working with. All right, with that bolted in place, I want to build a plate to go right here because the firewall is not very strong, and that's going to give me a point where we can start building some bracketry to make pedal assembly. So next I'm going to cut another plate, basically the same shape as this real quick. Power. Much better. Okay, just whipped up this bracket, and this is going to get bolted to the back of the master cylinder. All right, very carefully. This is going to go on here. Try not to knock it off of there. All right, that's gonna sit like that. Now I can start to build some bracketry off of this in order to make a mount for the brake pedal. All right, before I start building the brackets off of this thing, I need to add some supports in here because everything under here is just sheet metal. The firewall is sheet metal, the sides of the cowl is just sheet metal, and I need something to attach all this to so that it's strong, because otherwise I could just push my foot right through this firewall. So I think I'm gonna put some steel right here and then a bar that goes across all the way across the dashboard, and that's going to give me something to attach all this to that's strong, because I can't just attach it right to the dash. This is just sheet metal. So I'm going to do that real quick. All right, with that thing burned into place, now we've got somewhere we can attach these brackets to. This is going to be really strong versus attaching it to the dash, which is really flimsy. So now I'm going to make a bracket that's going to go from this bar to here, and that's something we can mount the pedal mechanism off of. All right, just cut that bracket out, and this is gonna sit up here like this. And then the pedal can bolt through this hole right here, and that's where it's gonna swing from so that it can press on the brake master cylinder. So I'm just gonna tack this into place real quick. All right, with that tacked into place, I went ahead and pulled the brake pedal off of that brake assembly that I had, and this bolt is gonna go through here. And that's what's gonna hold the brake pedal, so now the brake pedal can swing, and you can see this pin is lined up perfectly with the master cylinder. This isn't necessarily where the brake pedal is going to sit side to side yet, because I'm going to install the clutch pedal next, and that's going to determine where this is going to sit. Whether I put it on this side of the master cylinder or this side, I can just flip this pin around. All right, so next I want to cut a hole for the clutch master cylinder. That's going to come through about right here, and then I can build a bracket that comes off of it just like this one, which is going to come all the way to this bar that I had welded into place, and that's going to connect the two sides and add a lot of strength, and then we can install the clutch pedal. Got it. All right, if you're wondering why I cut such a large hole in the firewall, it's because this is the master cylinder for the clutch, and you can see it's got this big rubber grommet that goes around it, and that's not what's going to hold this master cylinder into place, but it's going to make it look more finished, and it's got about a 2 3/8 hole that it goes into, so that's why I cut that hole so big. This is going to sit in the firewall like that. All right, so if you look at the end of this master cylinder, you can see it's got a square shape on it, and that's how Dodge decided they were going to mount this master cylinder to the pedal bracket. If you look at the pedal bracket, you can see the corresponding square hole that this goes into, and basically you just put it in there and you turn this like 90 degrees and that locks it into place, and that's what holds this on the pedal bracket. So since I'm not using the aluminum one, I got to replicate this hole out of a piece of steel, and that's what I did right here. I cut this shape out already, and then this is going to go onto the master cylinder, and then you can just turn it and it'll lock into place. So I need to weld this piece of steel under the dashboard so that it'll hold this on the firewall. All right, with that tacked into place, I want to build the other side of this pedal bracket that's going to support the bolt that this pedal's bolted through. And luckily I can just reuse the template that I used for this side. So I'm going to cut another one of these out, and then I can weld it in over here, and that'll hold this pedal into place. Okay, just like always, I started with that cardboard template, cut this out of a piece of steel, and now this is going to get welded up here. Just like that, and that's what's going to support the pedal. So let me tack that into place. Okay, this is what it looks like tacked into place. I just went ahead and threw the clutch pedal in there to make sure it's hanging in the correct spot. Everything looks really good. I think I'm going to pull it out and fully weld this bracket assembly, and then after that, you can see I drilled some holes right here. This is where it's going to bolt to this crossbar that I put in, but I don't want to weld these tabs on until I fully weld this, because I know this is going to move around a little bit when I weld it. So I'm going to fully weld this thing and then put it back in, and I can make some tabs to bolt this to this dash bar. Okay, got that all welded up. I also went ahead and made this brace for the top of it. I know you're never going to see any of this, but that'll make it a lot stronger. So I think next I'm going to throw this back in, and we can start looking at how I'm going to modify the pedals in order to fit under the dash. Okay, I got the pedal bracket back installed, and now I'm going to weld these tabs on here. And this is going to attach the bracket to this bar that I welded in earlier, and that's what's going to make this really strong. So these are going to go right here. Just like that. All right, that's going to make that really strong. Okay, with that welded in, I went ahead and punched that stud out of the brake pedal. Now I'm going to put this in and try and get it into place. All right, with the brake pedal on there, you can see that there's a gap in between the edge and the pedal, so I'm going to cut this little spacer down, and that's going to take up that gap right there, and then that'll keep the pedal from moving left to right. I want it to be in line with this so that we can hook this up on this side of the brake pedal. Let me cut this spacer real quick. All right, just cut that down. So we got spacer and the pedal. Just like that. Okay, to connect the pedal to the push rod here, I'm just going to put this bolt through here, and then I tap this little spacer. This is going to thread onto the push rod. Just like that. And then I've got this heim joint in a bolt. And that's going to go right here. And now I can just cut this bolt down, and I'm going to weld it inside that spacer. Then I can thread the two together, and that's how the pedal is going to attach to the push rod. Okay, just welded that together. Now we can put this on and start messing with the pedal. That's how that's going to look. Now I want to start messing with the length of the pedal. This isn't where I want the pedal to actually sit. It's a little bit too high. I just need it to be lower a little bit. So I'm gonna cut this off, lower it down, but I need to throw a seat in here so I can get a good feel for how my foot's gonna hit on this pedal. Okay, check it out. I just threw the old seat in here. This isn't the seat that I'm gonna be using when we finally assemble this thing, but it'll work for now to help me get the pedal position into place. Truck stuff. All right, you probably can't see, but the pedal is slightly too high off the ground. I want it to touch probably about right here on my boot. So basically I'm just gonna cut this right here and lower it down a little bit. Okay, just cut that out, and now I'm going to tack that right there. See how that feels. Okay, got that all ground down and reinstalled. You probably can't tell, but it's a lot more comfortable for me now. So the next thing we're gonna do is basically the same thing with the clutch pedal, see what we can do to get that mounted and in the right spot. Okay, I got the clutch pedal here, and it's basically a little bit too wide the way this is set up, but I wanna redo it in a similar fashion, just needs to be skinnier. So I'm gonna cut this off here and then just remake this lower portion of the pedal out of some more 3/8 steel and then put it back in, and we can reattach it the same way that we did the brake pedal to the master cylinder. Okay, got that pedal reinstalled after I cut the bottom of it off, and now we're gonna cut a piece of 3/8 plate in this shape and weld it into place. Okay, just like the brake pedal, this is gonna go in here. I'm just gonna tack that into place somewhere in there, and then I can pull it out, fully weld it. Okay, just reinstalled the clutch pedal. I also went ahead and installed the clutch master cylinder. You can see right here, you just put that in and turn it 90 degrees, and that's how that stays in there. And in order to prevent it from coming off, I made this little bracket which slips over it. And that's gonna bolt in through that hole right there. And that'll stop it from rotating. So once you install it, you bolt this plate on, and then the clutch master cylinder cannot come back out of there. Anyway, put the pedal in so that I can make the push rod that's gonna connect from here to the clutch master cylinder, just like this push rod. And I also need to make a spacer for up here. Okay, I just made this push rod. All I did was weld a bolt to the end of the factory push rod, and then the bolt threads into that heim joint. So now we can put this in here and mark where the hole needs to be drilled on the pedal for the end of the heim joint to bolt through. All right, just reinstalled that after I drilled that out. Now you can see how that's attached. I think I'm gonna have to clearance this a little bit on here in order to get the nut on that bolt, but this is how this is gonna work. I can't press it right now because this is a pre-bled system and the slave cylinder is not hooked up to anything. It's just got a plastic retainer on it, so I can't actually press this pedal, but it feels really good and it's all done. This is what the position looks like from the driver's seat. Plenty of room for both my feet. I should have some room over here for a gas pedal, but I like the way this has turned out so far. Okay, so is it done 100%? Not quite. If you've ever driven a car before, you know that when you press the brakes, the brake lights come on. So how are we gonna make that happen? Well, I got a couple of these switches and we're gonna mount these up here near the brake pedal, and then I'm gonna weld a tab on the top of the pedal so that it will press on this and release it when you press the brakes, and that's gonna activate the brake lights. And if you've ever driven a manual transmission, you know that you don't wanna start it without the clutch pedal pushed in. So I need to put a switch on the clutch pedal also so that when you push the clutch in, it'll allow you to start the truck. So next we're gonna install a couple of these. Okay, first step, drill a hole in this bracket. Second step, tap it. Got it. All right, it's always easier to drill it and tap it when it's just a square block like this. So now I'm gonna cut this out, and that'll be the bracket that's gonna hold it. Okay, check it out. There's one bracket. The switch just threads right into it, and then you can tighten that jam nut down against it, and that's what stops it from moving. There's the one for the brake pedal. Here's the one for the clutch. Okay, since the fabrication is basically done with the pedals on the inside here, I think I'm gonna pull this whole assembly out, get some primer and some paint on them, since they're not gonna need to come out for a long time. I'll probably pull them out before I paint this thing, but until then, these are just gonna sit in here and I don't want them to rust. So I'm gonna take this whole assembly out, clean it up, paint it, put new grease in the bushings, and then reassemble it for the final time. All right, check it out. It's been a couple days. I painted the entire pedal assembly, took it apart, cleaned it, and then I re-greased all of it. Probably put entirely too much grease on it, but I plan on pressing the brake and the clutch pedal at least a couple of times while I'm driving, so I need it to last for a long time. But here's what it looks like all reassembled. You can get a better look at how the brake light switch and the clutch switch are gonna work. If you couldn't see it when it was in the truck, but the brake pedal is going to sit up against this like that, and then when you press the brake, it will release the button and turn the brake lights on. Same with the clutch pedal. For comparison, here's the original brake pedal assembly next to the one that we built, and you can see that they're fairly similar, but there is a big difference between the distance between the original brake master cylinder and the clutch master cylinder compared to how close together they are on the one that we built. And they're about 3.5 inches apart, and some people might say that's a big distance, but I think the next thing I'm gonna do is throw this back in the truck, and then we can start on the next part. So let's do that real quick. It's a lot heavier than it used to be.
the needle.
Okay, now that those are installed, the last thing I want to do is mount the reservoir for the clutch master cylinder. It's like this. And I think I'm going to probably put it over here somewhere. It's basically the best place for it. But I think I need to shorten this hose and possibly switch it around a little bit. But I want to mount it right there. I just can't bolt it directly to the firewall because the mount is angled. So I need to make an angled mount for it so this will sit perfectly level. Okay, the simplest solution was to bevel the edge of a piece of square stock, and then I welded 4 bolts to it. And this is going to attach to the back of the reservoir. Just like that. And then I can drill 2 holes in the firewall and then bolt it through, and that should hold it more level. Yeah, it's going to sit like that. All right, it's the next day. I went ahead and painted that bracket and then reinstalled it. It looks really good. Now the master cylinder reservoir is fully mounted and it sits below the hood here, and it's also level and it clears everything, and I think it looks really nice. So this is basically the final setup minus hooking up the hydro boost. I'm not going to hook the hydro boost up until final assembly. This is all just mock-up, but the way the hydro boost works is the high pressure line comes off the power steering pump and connects to this port, and then it comes out of this port right here and heads down to the steering gear, and then this is a return line that goes to the return line on the reservoir for the power steering pump. But this is the whole setup, and I think it turned out really good. The master cylinder for the clutch is all installed. This comes as a full assembly and it's pre-bled, so it's not hooked up to anything right now. The slave cylinder is just sitting right here because I don't even have a clutch in this thing right now. And I don't want to hook that up. I can't hook it up until final assembly, but I think this part turned out really good too. Okay, that's one more project checked off the list, but are we done? Heck no, there's still a ton more work that needs to be done to this thing. If you had to ask, I'd say we're probably only at about the 20% mark as far as this build goes. So why does it take so long? Well, I know it's hard to tell on camera, and unless you've owned one of these vehicles from this era before, these things are incredibly small. So trying to fit a lot of big technology into a small area is incredibly hard and it takes a long time. But that's what I like about these builds. I like having to problem solve and try and figure out how we're going to get things like this to work with a vehicle that it was never designed to work with. Anyway, super happy with how all this turned out. I also like the way that my feet have room around the pedals on the inside. So that's going to wrap up this part of the build. So what are we going to do next? Well, I got a box of parts over there. If you want to guess what's inside that box, that's what we're going to be doing next. But these things aren't going to build themselves. So sometimes you got to tell yourself, just go out there and get after it. And that's what I'm going to do. So as usual, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future episodes. And that's going to be it for this one. And I'll see you guys later.